Hi, everyone, and welcome to Parmjit Speaks. Today is episode number nine. And today's episode is talking about diversity, inclusion, and the new generation of project managers. And I have a very special guest with me today. Our guest speaker today is Francelys Fabian, who is not only is she whom I consider a very good friend of mine, but we had the great fortune of working together in a Fortune 500. So I'm actually going to give it to Francelys so she could introduce herself. So Francelys, take it away.
Thank you so much, Parmjit. So my name is Francelys Fabian. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a queer Afro-latina, and I immigrated from the Dominican Republic at a young age, and I moved to New York City, where I spent most of my childhood. So my path to PM, or project management, I graduated from Penn State with a degree in medical laboratory science. I took a travel contract to the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. And from there, I took another contract to the greater Chicago area where I worked in laboratory and eventually moved to Denver, Colorado to take a position as a laboratory supervisor and blood bank supervisor. After working about 5 years there, I decided to pursue a career in project management, being as I had been managing projects the whole time and realized that I had a knack for it and a good skills in leadership that I wanted to cultivate. So I got a master's degree in project management and leadership. So my credentials are MLS from ACP Board Certified and PM. Um,
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I do want to say that the views expressed are not representative of the organization that I work for and are solely mine.
Terrific. Yeah. And and Priscilla, so you talked a little bit about that, but and I know that I'm kind of diverting away from the conversation I want to have with you, but you talked a little bit about that Black Hawk Indian Reservation. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit about that? Because I remember when you and I first spoke about it, it was just super exciting.
Yeah, so right around the time of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests in North Dakota,
Mhm.
I started to notice that there was a gray area for me when it came to knowing what it was like for Indigenous peoples in this country. And so I took the opportunity to work on the Blackfeet Reservation in Northwest Montana. And it was a 6-month contract that ended up being a 2-year stint.
Wow.
I really, really enjoyed my time there. I learned so much. And during that time, I went back to school and I took a course in Indigenous peoples of North America. And it was just eye-opening, not only reading about it, but living it and understanding the traumas that still existed today for people living on reservations.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really important time in my life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the work that you did there because I think it was probably so impactful. And I'm sure that the communities that you served were incredibly grateful for you having been there. And so so talking about your work there, for example, so, being that you at the time were kind of just breaking into project management, do you think that there was anything that you learned while doing your work on the reservation that you felt that could have been applied or could still be applied to project management?
Yeah, definitely. I think that with project management, you know, we are at the will of our organizations and we're really put to the task of managing these strategic moves within the organization and bringing results. And I think what I learned on the Blackfeet Reservation was that really the systems that were in place
Mm-hmm.
don't work. They don't work
Yeah.
for a lot of people. They're not conducive of a lot of success, I would say. I felt what it was like, and I'm kind of going off here, but I felt what it was like to live in a food desert. Not only living in New York City, but there's food deserts on reservations. There's not a lot of access to fresh foods. And I think that realizing that having systems in place is really important for the success, not just of an organization, but a community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know there's a food desert in Nevada. I'm not just Nevada, but in Colorado. So you and I volunteered at a food desert in Colorado. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm going to jump in because when we volunteered there, I definitely saw again how project management could be applied and how, in a way, probably unintentionally, it was being applied. So.
Mhm.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the volunteer work that is taking place in Colorado at the food deserts there?
Yeah, so I volunteer for two organizations. One of them is Food Bank of the Rockies, and the other one, which was the organization that we volunteered for in that specific time, is called We Don't Waste. And
Okay.
so basically, what they do is rescue food from organizations or businesses, farms, hydroponic farms, and make them accessible to people who need them. And at no cost, and there are no requirements. So there's no proof of income or anything like that. If you need, show up, and our organizations like this will give you things that you need to survive, whether it's diapers, food, frozen food, meat. And I think that when we were volunteering there, we noticed that there's a system, there's an assembly line, there are people that are delegated certain tasks, registering, translating,
Mm-hmm.
filling the cars. And I think that what really motivated me working for a food bank or volunteering for Food Bank of the Rockies and We Don't Waste were the leaders that were really good at communicating, delegating, understanding how the system worked, and really making it efficient, because at the end of the day, these are all volunteers, and we want to feel that what we're doing is making a difference. So I really was inspired by these leaders that I saw managing projects.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly how I felt when we got there, thinking about number one, firstly, how the food got there. And obviously, I'm sure there was an initiation process, right, before all of that took
Yeah.
place, and how the food got to the area, how there was different project team members at different intersections of the process and handing out food to the individuals who needed it, and then understanding, okay, what are the requirements in order to deliver this food? Do we need to know how many members are part of this family?
Mhm.
Yeah, and the whole process, like you just said, right? It looked a lot like an assembly line, and it absolutely reminded me of just a project. It really was, from initiation to the end. The
Yeah.
only difference is, I guess, the only way it maybe wouldn't qualify as a project is because it is uh there's no end. This is ongoing, right? So it's more now operational, but it started off as a project. So
Mhm. Of
thank you for sharing that.
course.
And so, Frances, you mentioned a little bit about, being not only, right, are you a female in tech, right? We both are, but you mentioned being a queer Afro-Latina in tech. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. If it's okay. I
Yeah.
want you to share, your experience being not just a woman in tech, but being a queer woman and an Afro-Latina woman, and how maybe it's impacted you, if at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So fortunately for myself, as a queer Afro-Latina in tech, I exist in intersections that have allowed me to experience a lot of different point of views. And I learned my lessons learned from that was that we must make the space. So I think, for example, I know that you and I have experienced this where we've tried to anglicize our names to make them more accepted in corporate environments. And I think that just from that initial interaction, what's my name? I am already different.
Mm,
And I think that that feeling for a long time in my career starting out was I wanted to make myself more digestible. So I shortened my name, I anglicized my name, and over time I realized, no, you can say my name.
all
You
right.
my name, we can take a few extra seconds, and I totally understand if it's not something that you've heard before, but I think it shows a lot of respect when you take the time to learn someone's name. And I think that when we do that, we send the wrong message. We send
Mm-hmm.
the wrong message that me showing up authentically is not enough. And I think that as I became more confident as a leader, as I became more confident in corporate environments, I became more comfortable with being the other or only in rooms, and so a lot of the times, if it wasn't for one reason or another, whether it's that I'm a woman or that I'm a Black Latina or that I'm queer, I I have stood in rooms speaking for people, and so many people like me. And I think that, when we make the space for that, when we ask people what their preferred pronouns are, when we take the time to learn people's names, and we are making space for people to feel accepted and really just create a better work environment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you touched on that. So I wasn't even thinking about that. So for folks who are listening in, uh, we again, Francelys and I. So I'm my family's from India. My full name is Parmjit. However, my whole life, and especially at work, I have been called Pam. And I asked folks to call me Pam. Number one, I'll tell you where Pam came from. So it's not just something I made up. I am born in the UK, and I had a nanny in the UK. And my nanny, a very kind Jamaican woman, couldn't say my name, Paramjeet. And so she started calling me Pam. And that kind of just stuck. And then it became easier for everyone to just call me Pam rather than call the name that my parents had given me. And so as I got older, and now I think when I hit, I'm not going to give away my age. When I hit 40, I thought, you know what? I that's not my name. And I wanted to honor and respect the name that my parents gave me. And I was a little tired of just, I guess, making everyone else feel comfortable. And I felt that, if someone really wanted to learn to pronounce my name, and they had respect for me, that they would. And so I have since reverted back to my name that my parents have given me, which is Paramjit. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, we need to embed systemic change in every interaction. And sometimes the learning curve it might take a while, and we need to show people grace and have understanding. But I
Absolutely.
think that what we're doing is paving the way for more people like us with
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And this is actually a great segue into the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about, which is, cultural confidence. How, Francis, in your opinion, how do we expand our understanding of other cultures and respect our cultural differences so that everyone in the workplace is comfortable? And again, right? America, and I know that my hope is that this podcast reaches the world, but here in the United States, right, we are a melting pot of different cultures, of different ethnicities. And I think it's important that we have cultural competence and understanding and respect of others and their how they grew up and how they culturally do things. And so what do you think that looks like?
I think that working as project managers, we collaborate, and you can't have collaboration without understanding. So we need to expand on our understanding of other cultures,
Mm-hmm.
especially with a global work environment.
Yeah.
We're going to come across that more and more. So by expanding our understanding of other cultures, we are respecting that we are all different. And the fact of the matter is that as a project manager, you have to remove yourself from the center. We need to decentralize the group so that everyone can work. The way that I like to describe it is that we're electrons. We're not in the nucleus. We got our protons and our neutrons. We got people that are assigned different roles doing the work, and we're just orbiting around that, making sure that there are obstacles removed out of the way. But we're really orbiting around this team and supporting the team. And so I think the best way to support a team is to create a culture of understanding and of acceptance. And we can't accept unless we understand that we're all different.
Yeah.
So I really do believe that, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Francis, I also, and I couldn't agree more. I also want to talk a little bit about African Americans in tech, right? I know you are very familiar with, the stats surrounding that. So again, as an Afro-Latina in tech,
Mhm.
have you seen a lot of people who look like you, or is it changing? Because I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of people who looked like maybe you or I. Do you see that changing? And what things do you think need to take place for the African American community as well to feel accepted in the workplace?
Well, I mean, as a person from the diaspora, I wouldn't say that I can speak for African Americans, but I can say I can speak for myself. And
Mhm.
being in rooms where I have been one of the few or the only, I think that there is still a lot of work to be done, but I think that there is a lot of work that already has been done. And we can see that, for example, there is this conference that happens every year called Afro Tech, and it happened most recently in November in Texas, and it had the most attendance that it had from previous years. And I think that just goes to show how many more Black people are entering the tech field, STEM fields. And I think that that's amazing, because bringing in different points of views, bringing in different experiences is only going to make our technology better. And we talk about,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
we talk about racial biases in AI. I think we have had a discussion with that, about that. And I think that the only way we can really see a difference is if there are more people in the room, for sure.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think it's so important to get those different perspectives from
Mhm.
different people of different ethnicities and folks who have different experiences, right? Because I know for you, Frances, your experiences growing up are going to be very different from mine, right? I grew up in an Indian household. I grew
Mhm.
up in what I consider a hood in Jersey, and you actually grew up in the Northeast also. So I know
Mhm.
your experience is different, but I think it's so important to bring our collective experiences to the table
Yes.
for, I think, growth, for
Mhm.
growth and additional competencies. And so have you ever, Francois, experienced, I'm just not me putting words in your mouth or anything, but I genuinely want to understand, have you ever felt that maybe as not just as a woman, not just as someone who identifies as queer or someone who identify or who is Afro-Latina,
Mhm.
have you ever, just even as a younger person, felt that all of these things have had an impact on the way you've done business or the way that some folks have interacted with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have endless examples, but really the tying thread, the theme throughout these kind of interactions and experiences that I've had, that still I carry with me to this day sometimes, and think back like, wow, that really happened.
Yeah.
I think the tying thread is, for lack of a better word, it's ignorance,
Yeah.
and we've got so much information at our fingertips. There is no excuse for it anymore. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of experiences where I've felt this undercurrent of, I am too different, and so I need to smooth out some of those differences so that I can be accepted in these rooms. I no longer subscribe to that idea, but I do carry with me those kind of experiences, and whether it's unconscious or not, I think that calling it out is important. And one question I like to ask is, you know could you clarify what you just said? I want to understand it better. And I think giving someone that opportunity to edit themselves, even if it's me showing a little bit more grace than maybe what I have to or is, asked. I think that it gives people an opportunity to check themselves. There is a lot of work to be done, but it's not just on the people of color, right? We need
Absolutely.
to, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you just said, right? There's a lot of work to be done, but I think it takes work being done from both sides. And like you said, right? But it's not our job, right, as people of color or as women, or it's not our job to do the homework for other folks,
Yeah.
but maybe uh just using our platform or our voice to make them aware of things that you, as you just said, right, that they may not be cognizant of or they may not
Right.
be aware of. I actually listened to so this is the perfect topic. I actually listened to a TEDx talk recently,
Mhm.
and one of the speakers who was talking, he was a queer man, and he talked a little bit about I guess a comment that was made by one of his leaders. And he saw it as a microaggression,
Mhm.
which she may not have realized. And so he went up to her after at the end of the day, and he pulled her aside and had the conversation with her that, hey, by the way, when you were speaking, you said this, you use this specific term. I don't know if you're aware, but this term can be offensive to people like me. And he said that she looked like a deer in the headlights, that she didn't, I guess she maybe looked a little taken aback by it. But he said that since then, anytime he's heard her speak, she's never brought it up again. And for him, it was a moment to educate,
Right.
again, but whereas although it's not our responsibility, I think it's important to, yeah, lead with empathy and compassion, and maybe understand that, like you just right, like you just said, that it's not always intentional, or folks don't say or do things necessarily consciously.
Right. Right.
So yeah. And then you also talked a little bit about AI and how AI kind of discriminates. I'm actually glad you brought that up too. So I was looking for this before I got professional headshots taken, right? I needed photos for my business. And so but I didn't want to spend money. I was being a little frugal. And so I found that AI can give you deliver headshots, and it could, and portrait images that look just as nice as maybe a professional photographer taking those pictures. And so I bought a package of, I think it was 60 photos, and the AI tool asked me a series of questions. What is my ethnicity? Yeah, what color hair do I have? What are some of my features? And then it took my photos and produced 60 images. Almost every single one of those images looked like, while yes, I'm Asian, I'm not Chinese, or I'm not Japanese. But in all those pictures that the AI produced, all of those pictures, and in my opinion, and in the opinions of all those folks in my circle who had seen the photos, all of them said, wow, that AI, they made you look like you were maybe, like I just said, Chinese or of another ethnicity. You definitely don't look Indian. And so there's definitely that AI bias,
Yes, I
right?
agree, definitely. And I, I mean, AI, it's been around for a few decades, but I think that it's got a lot more work to do. And that's definitely one of the areas. And it can be a scary thing.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of legal implications because of, biases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so now I know we only have about 5 or so minutes left. So I kind of want to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about the younger generation of project managers, right? So Francelys, and I don't know if I've said this to you before. I think because I look a lot younger than I am, I think I get, tr again, and unintentionally sometimes,
Mhm.
treated a little differently and maybe not taken as seriously.
Mhm.
So why don't you, if you would, talk a little bit about what it's like to be a younger person in tech, not necessarily just a female, but a younger person in tech. What are maybe some new ideas that I think younger PMs can bring to the table, and that they've already started bringing to the table, that I think the world of project management can benefit from?
Yeah, so when we're looking at what the Project Management Institute is saying that their exam is focusing on now, it's not just business and processes, but more weight is being emphasized on the people management. And I think that moving forward, project managers are really going to be pivotal in the success of organizations. And so with that logic, we can correlate that people management is going to be key in success of organizations. I think 42% of the exam is focusing on this domain.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about that, it's not just a science, it's an art. There are some limitations that I think project managers are gonna need to overcome. For example, managing teams overseas or online. And then we have to ask ourselves, how do we influence through a screen? And I think what new generations of project managers and new talent is bringing to the table is being able to influence through a screen. So there's a balance. We need to do the self-work necessary to authentically engage with our teams. But we can do that, we can get from kickoff to lessons learned in a lot of different ways. And so how do you do this in a way that is authentic to you? I think what this does, it fosters an environment where people can be more engaged, maybe a little less formal, but more willing to show up without the filters.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I I actually do a workshop in which I discuss cross-cultural communication. And
That sign me up.
yeah, and so also, right, for me, I think that yes, the cross-cultural communication is important, especially when you are dealing with teams, right? As project managers, how often, right, do we deal with teams? Maybe you deal with a team from India, but you're dealing maybe with another team member who is here in the US. So I think that understanding is important. But also understanding that different groups use technology differently, right?
Yeah.
But also understanding that there is still a value to the way things have been done. And the reason I'm bringing any of this up is I've noticed, right, a lot of us in maybe what's considered a younger generation. Although if you ask my brother this question, he would say, you no longer qualify to call yourself someone who's part of the younger generation. But as maybe a younger group, I know we use a lot of different technologies, right? So I know Slack is something that I use, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, etc. I know a lot of these things have become much more prevalent. And I know even a lot of older generations have gotten comfortable using them as well. But
Mhm.
I don't know about you. For me, I still see value in, I love a good Excel spreadsheet. I might be breaking a cardinal rule by saying that as a PM, but I still love good old Excel spreadsheets. I still love having pen and paper
Mhm.
and taking notes on a notebook. So
Yeah, I think that there's a part of our brain that is uh, used to, not just used to that, but there is something that gets lit up, a part of our brain that gets lit up when we're doing something manually or working something from the foundation. I think with the new advancements of technologies, though, we're gonna be leaning on AI, on these tools to not just communicate with our teams, but lean on these AI and these technologies to give us the space to focus on other areas of project management
yeah.
that you can't do using a tool or too sophisticated for, machinery.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, I think that talks to one of the questions that has been circulating since AI first came around and I think I've had this conversation with some of my other guests, but
Mhm.
is AI going to replace the need for the human project manager? And I don't think it is. I think there's still something that technology just cannot do. There's a human element that cannot be replaced, I think, by AI or by technology in general.
Yeah, there was an article by the Harvard Business Review that I read recently that talked about how project managers are shifting away from administrative work and leaning on technology to do that part, and that the project manager of the future will need to cultivate strong soft skills, leadership capability, strategic and business acumen. So I think that I don't think we're going anywhere.
Yeah.
It just might be looking a little different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So, Francelys, this was an incredible conversation. And, I have so much love for you. And I'm so glad you were on this episode and brought, again, a different perspective to project management, to business in general, right? As not just a young woman, but as a female, as someone who identifies as queer, someone who is Afro-Latina, because I think it it is imperative that we recognize folks who I don't want to say fit those labels. 'Cause I don't like to label people. I don't like to group people in, but I think it's so important to have perspectives of
Right.
individuals who come from our communities and from folks who maybe look different than even us, right? I think it's so important. Um,
Yes, so thank you so much for creating the space for this kind of conversation. I hope to see more of it. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, any other closing thoughts, Frances, before we say goodbye to our listeners?
I would say that that's a good one. That's a good I would say that, invest in yourself as a leader, do the work that it takes to authentically show up, not just look like an authentic version of yourself, but do the work. And one thing that for me has helped is journaling. So writing things down. I don't know if it's just the project manager in me, but I love writing things down, writing my thoughts, reflecting on what's the brand I want to create for myself, what's my vision statement, what are my values that I want to carry with me, and what is my leadership style, not just identifying that, but developing that over time. So
Yeah,
I would leave with that thought.
absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, for bringing so much value to this incredibly insightful conversation.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Parmjit.
Thank you. Bye.